Hello and welcome. My name is Trismegistus, and today we're going to be reading through and speculating about the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 378, Trains on Another Level, posted by V. Hello! The code refactor of Rails presented last week is great, but the motivation for such a task wasn't just shape changes for Rails. As I explained last week, we can now define any kind of rail shape, and we had some very specific shapes in mind all along. Over or under? We want multi-level crossings for trains, but how? Bridges or tunnels? At first, it would seem like going underground is the safer bet. We already have experience with belts and pipes doing that. Simple. We draw the entrance and the exit, and the middle is magically connected, and that's it. The second layer of rails should also be able to use curves and rail signals, otherwise it would be quite limited. Sometimes you already want to interact with items inside of underground belts. With trains, this would be a lot worse as they could run out of fuel, stop at signals, etc. Building curves, signals, or interacting with trains inside of a tunnel probably means we need to be able to walk inside. If we can walk in a tunnel, biters and robots should be able to do it as well. If tunnels can have curves, how could you tell which tunnel entrance connects to which exit when looking from the outside? Tunnels over water don't quite feel right. Drawing tunnels would be surprisingly difficult, as we would need to do some expensive masking that Factorio isn't currently capable of. And more. The idea of an elevated rail seems to have much more potential, although drawing in an upper layer certainly won't be easy either. Also, you just want to boldly see all of your trains in their full glory instead of hiding them somewhere in a cellar. Such an idea would consist of rail ramp, the transition between the lower and upper layer. Elevated rail, tracks buildable above most things. Rail support. Elevated rails would need supports at some intervals. We've then got a diagram and it has a caption elevated rail system pieces. These were the grey box graphics to test the gameplay of the new rail shapes and the ramps before the final graphics were created. Just to explain that, there's a bit of a zoom in if you open the image itself, and you have the normal rail on the left there, and then you've got this ramp. It's quite a long ramp, which is interesting, although it's actually, in real life, trains are very limited in the gradient they can climb. So this is actually sort of unrealistically rampy, but it's quite a long ramp, which is interesting from a building it point of view. We've then got the elevated rail, which is the rail itself, at a higher level, and the rail support. Elevated rails. I know you've already scrolled down to see the ramps instead of reading this, but it just feels weird not to put a paragraph here. Okay, so as V says, this is the in-game art asset for the ramp, and it is very much, if we scroll up and look at the ramp here, it is very much that curve that's going on. I'm going to be 100% totally honest. It looks a little weird. That's basically because of this whole weird orthographic projection that the game has, if I can get my teeth in. It means that you end up with a very strange angle for things that they're trying to draw realistically. The rails in the game, especially that tweaked version that they showed last week, look good, but then when you really think about how the angles are, it's broken. And this kind of does to emphasize that. I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm just saying it does look a little bit weird. The perspective here is not like the perspective here, and that's because they're forcing it slightly, and that's fine. I'm not in any way complaining about it. I think it looks good. I think it looks like a good thing. It does look like it fits in the Factorio world. When we thought about the visual design with Albert and Irendel, we wanted the ramp to be heavy and industrial, but at the same time not quite perfectly stable and rigid. After multiple iterations, we have arrived to this combination of a solid concrete base combined with an upper metal structure. The concrete base helps show where the ramp touches the ground, while in contrast the metal part has a lot of holes so you could see entities placed behind the ramp most of the time. The metal is painted red, as mostly the other red entities in Factorio are related to trains. It helps the elevated rails belong to the rail family and stand out in the factory, as they should with their height. The rail ramp is the new longest entity in the game at 16 tiles long and 4 tiles wide, so we need to consider where and when to place it. It can only rotate in 4 directions. So this next diagram that they show is the rail ramp at various angles. We've obviously got the left to right that we've already seen, but we've then got right to left, and this seems to be down, what would it be, top to bottom? So in other words, this is the start point and this is the end point. So this is on the ground level, this is on the upper level, and then the other way around for this one. So this is bottom to top. So this is the ground level and this is the upper level. The rail support follows the style of the ramp, but with a difference that it can be rotated in 8 directions. It has a roughly 4x4 collision box, with the rotated ones all having the same shape. So this is the rail ramp. I think this looks awesome. It's interesting this doesn't have the rail over the top, so it seems like you can maybe place this. It's not like an automatically placed thing. That's kind of what I would interpret from how they've been talking about it. But you can place this where you want, and then it's up to you to sort of connect the rail on the top, and presumably that can act as a sort of a start point for rail. So you could do the cross pieces before you did the before the ramp sort of thing, is what I'm taking to be how you would use it. So the 8 directions I'm taking it to talk about are the up and down, left and right, diagonal directions as per normal Factorio rail directions. However, if you remember, in the last Friday Facts, they introduced a breaking up. So previously it would be 0 degrees, 45 degrees, 90 degrees, but they split that up, so it became 0, 22.5, 45, whatever the mass would be, 67.5, 90 degrees. So they've now got more angles for you to work with, or that you have to work with. And of course they have to do it on a 180 degree scale just for the visuals, basically. So, that is the, 22.5 is the same as 22.5, except that it's visually going to be different. So that's why there are 8 pieces. It's also showing that the vertical piece, so that's vertical, the top, the up and down piece, and the left and right piece are squares, whereas the all of the diagonals are done with this cross shape, and that's why they put this piece of belt round the edge, so that you can sort of very definitely see that these are buildable areas. It also helps to demonstrate, and it's shown better later on, but it also helps to demonstrate this point that there's lots of sort of gaps in the structure, which allows you to see what's behind whatever you've placed. It's not totally see-through, with total gas. So you've got points here where you can't quite see through, just one there and one there, and they're sort of worse in different places than others. That sort of block there. So there's possibility of maybe missing out a piece of belt or an insert or something like that. The elevated rails can be built between ramps held by rail supports along the way. The elevated rail can be constructed above anything except tall entities, rocket silo, roboport, big electric pole, etc. They have exactly the same rail shapes as the new ground rails do, and signals can be attached to the elevated rails. There are fences which help visually distinguish the elevated rails from ground rails. You can also see how they disappear on track crossings. In practice, replacing a colliding connection inside of a T-junction with a ramp going around it can already help a lot. What they're saying here, it's a bit of an odd description to it, but this is a T-junction, but it's one that's been adapted. So the straight rail at the top here, I'm not actually sure why they've done this bit. I'm not sure that matters, but what they're essentially showing, and why it's there, is that the straight pass, if this was like your main rail type of thing, this is more like a siding approach to it, so that if a train wants to go straight on, it's not having to go through the junction at all. I'm showing my lines there because I'm a left-hand drive person, so this is actually right-hand drive, but the train would blast through and not even really pause at this junction, only if there's literally a train in the way. So it wouldn't have to go through the junction as such. And then this is coming the other way, isn't it? So this is a right-hand drive. So again, this is actually this piece here. This is the straight rail across here that's been moved down and taken over the top. And of course, in normal Factorio, version 1.1 or whatever we're on, you would have to signal all this. You'd have to have loads of signals around, and actually it'd be more efficient, more simple to go across the center there. So This is another thing tying up with the previous update, where in a sense they're sort of giving us more options, you know, where, as I was saying in the last Friday Facts, you sort of end up with everyone having the same sorts of junctions, just slight tweaks in the signalling. This is saying that, look, if you want faster throughput, you know, through a main line that's across the, you know, from left to right, right to left, you can do that with these elevated rails because they don't interact as much with the main rails. So one of the things it's more like is a road system where you would have a you know, ramp up to, and that would take you up to another road on a motorway, for example, you know, 2 motorways crossing. So it's kind of giving you more options around that sort of design, which is interesting. It feels a bit more like it would be more suited to, say, a spaghetti type design, where you're just building rail as you need rail, and that, you know, I mean, this doesn't look like a standard blueprint that you would use, but I say it's giving you lots more options. You could always have the normal rail going through the middle, and this is like a super route for some special, you know, pass off, or maybe this is a way of getting a, you know, perhaps there's a mining outpost at the here, and this is just the route that goes to the mining outpost. So, from my point of view, as I say, giving you lots of options is really, really great. So yeah, with the ramp being long, and since we have only 2 layers, building a fully multi-level junction can get rather large, but the throughput potential is massive. It's worth noting that it's not just the level separation that helps. It's also the fact that we don't need change signals, so we can shorten the distance between normal rail signals a lot, as we don't need to guarantee there's enough space for a train behind the junction. So the point I think they're making is that there's no change signals, and so you can have shorter distance between normal signals. I'll be honest, if it seems like you could have a lot more then. If they're saying that what matters here is like throughput in this junction, then you could have very, very close signals. I don't see that you would have to have even these sorts of distances. You could have loads of them. I guess it would get silly. You know, it would be ridiculous that you're putting loads and loads of signals in. But yeah, what they're basically showing is that this is like this is almost like a 3D version of the Clapham Junction I was showing you last week, where you've got loads of different trains going across all over the place. This is clearly like maybe a bridge point between 2 sections of map, and this is like the big, a big ocean or something like that, because you notice there's quite a lot of landfill on the edges here, and this is just like, they're bringing resources in from maybe an island, what was effectively an island or nearly an island, and taking them across here. So, and we've got all sorts of fuel coming through. So we've got loads of oil moving around, loads of different rail tracks, different coloured trains, etc., etc. Again, note that all the pieces are red, so again, it's not looking like we are going to get the ability to do that. Maybe it's a mod that someone will do at some point. But yeah, it does look good. It does look a bit spaghetti, which is kind of what I was saying last week, that you can do more of that. But yeah, so it's really just trying to show the throughput. As you note here, they've got enough oil trains particularly going through that it's pausing. Again, the elevated rail signals just look awesome with the dangling wires and stuff. I really, really like that. I guess also it's helped slightly that they're allowing more of these connection points on rail. It does fill me with a little nervousness of like, so if you're trying to put another signal on a rail piece here, is it going to try and clip to the one behind it? I'm guessing there's, and I say I've not really properly read it yet, I'm guessing there's like a key to lift it, a control key to lift it up and down, so that it's, it won't clip to the bottom rail because you've told it, you want to do it at the higher level. So let's hope there is something like that, because this could be a nightmare trying to, attach another rail signal here and it's thinking that it's there. But yeah, it looks really good. So it might be a little painful to build some of it, but yeah, it does look really good. So this next one then, again, it's really big because it's blown up so that you can see the text on the video. So we'll take a look at the video separately as well. But just to scroll through that. So it says, specifically in arrays of train stops, having the exit and entrance on different levels is a game changer. Basically, what they're doing here is that the entry point is at ground level and the exit point for all of the trains is elevated. This means that although the trains are having to wait for other trains on their particular piece of track, there's no crossover signalling. So the trains that are leaving the junctions are only having to wait for other trains that are leaving the junctions. Trains that are coming in only have to wait for trains, to clear out of their junction. They're particularly showing this by having a fast route through. So there's lots of trains passing through here. These trains in normal version 1.1 Factorio would have to be pausing for each other, and it would massively impact the throughput. So yeah, it's a really good demonstration of a particular use case for the trains. Again, it ties up quite well with my Clapham Junction idea that, where you get out of this, you would then have loads and loads of tracks all going all over the place, signalled all about and sort of heading every which way. And this is like a compact area. Okay, so the next diagram that they show is one of these slidey diagrams. We'll just read the caption first. There is a very special patch that draws under terrain, which is visible only in places where the ramps or supports touch water. So what they're showing here is a comparison between, I can fit all of this on actually, between the water version and the landfill, basically the on-land version. So this is the water version, and this is the on-land version. One of the things to note here that they're not quite saying, but they're showing us, is that you don't have to put these on land. So the ramp and the supports don't have to be placed on land. Perhaps the start of the ramp does, as is shown here. Let go. This ramp here does start on water. On land. So perhaps it has to start on land. Maybe that's the condition, because normal rail, and maybe this is a change, but normal rail cannot be placed on water at all. So this would make sense that this has to be on land so that you can connect normal rail to it. But what they're essentially showing here is that if you had islands, you had two islands separated apart, and obviously you could get to them. There's a slight tweak there where with normal Factorio, you don't have a means of getting across water. You don't have boats in normal Factorio. Might we be getting boats? But these supports and the ramp can be on water. So you can just place enough ramps, and it's not said yet about the minimum distance with these. You can place these between two islands, so you can have a proper style, real world rail bridge where it's just supports placed into the water and the track goes across the rail. I say it would be nice to have some kind of road bridge equivalent, or perhaps boats in order to make that simple, because at the moment, or rather the implication of this is that the only way you're going to be able to get between your islands is via rail. So you could obviously do the whole laying the track in front of you when you wanted to move across, but it seems to me that we're getting into the territory where you need either boats or some sort of road equivalent to this. What they're really showing here is that there is a visual difference. So when it's over water, it gains this extra piece here, and that you can see the sort of fading into the water thing, which looks really awesome. But that goes away when it's on the land. It just goes into the terrain. And here as well, you see it's gaining this extra sort of supporting material that sort of blends into the water. And it just looks really awesome. I will absolutely be doing this. I wouldn't be surprised if this is probably mostly how I do the overhead rail. Use it to bridge across water, because that just looks rocking. So the next part here is another video, and it has a caption saying, in case you decide to route rails through a lake, because why not, islands can become opportunities for multi-level crossings. So let's show that video at normal size. And here we see, as it says, that you can have all sorts of weird rail intersections. They're using the levels here to avoid having to do signals or crossing points, basically. So there are signals, because you don't want trains crashing into each other, but you don't have to signal them as in this rail could be interacting with this one. It is because they're then creating a junction adding on here. But this one is not having to have interactive signals with this one, is the type of thing they're showing, because these routes are independent because they're elevated or on normal level. Looking at this diagram, it's confirming that you can just build rail supports onto water, and that's how you can cross water with rails. You don't need to landfill, half the island and ruin the island. Always an annoyance because you can't pick up landfill. So this looks really good. I guess maybe there's something that you'd have to landfill the dot in between. These are very close, notice. I don't know if that implies that this is the minimum distance. They are fairly consistently far apart, so perhaps that is the minimum distance. There's none that are gigantically far apart. It does look really cool. It looks messy, but that's kind of what they're trying to show. Okay, so next up they're showing us another diagram here, and the caption is, building something elevated can be done with the rail planner. Either you can press a keyboard shortcut to switch the destination layer, or you can start the rail planner on a ramp, rail support, or an elevated rail. So this kind of answers my question from earlier, that it will be a keyboard shortcut to take it up, although it does look like it does auto connections. Again, makes me slightly nervous, because we know that the rail planner is not the most cooperative of things. Is it going to be jumping between layers and levels? When you're trying to put signals on, that could get a bit annoying. But one day, Coverx said, why doesn't the rail planner just snap to the rail you're pointing at? And since that day it does. Rail planner just connects to any rail you pick, including between ground and elevated levels. This also massively helps mitigate issues related to the rail planner having more directions. The rail planner can often find connections you wouldn't even expect to be possible, which can be mesmerizing to play with. And so it finishes off here with a much more complicated and probably real-world type build. And the caption is, as a result, this can happen a lot quicker than you'd think. Let's just look at that diagram here. Note that the caption is called Junction Hell. And the implication is that basically they've used the rail planner to kind of create this interesting setup. So I made the comment that it was looking a bit like a kind of fairground ride style, like a roller coaster rather than a train system, which I don't mind. This looks even more like that. This track going around here looks like it's actually from a roller coaster, and it's more because of the way it's weaving around rather than necessarily the look of the track pieces. But yeah, it does look like it would belong at a fairground. There's lots of signals here as well. We see there are lots of and all sorts of stuff. They clearly, I don't know about contrived this, but they've clearly deliberately done it as a spaghetti type build. This doesn't look like it's particularly using blueprints and that sort of thing. And we've obviously got lots of different types of connections in a sense. So these pieces are going this way and that. Conclusion. Allowing trains to cross paths on different levels has been one of the most requested features for a very long time. We had always felt it makes perfect sense, but trains in Factorio would rarely ever get into serious enough throughput issues to justify adding elevated rails. The expansion changed this landscape quite a bit. If we expect players to generally build larger factories than in the base game, train throughput could become an issue. And since you are expected to travel away from the home planet, having a train system that doesn't deadlock would be more important than ever before. It's not hard to guess that implementing this would require a lot of time, and working on the expansion behind closed doors allowed us some breathing room where we could make bigger experiments. Between Boskid with the mechanics and Priscilla with the drawing code, just the programming took a few months. On the graphics side, we could reuse a lot of initial Blender setup from the rework of ground rails, but that didn't get us very far. The ramps were simply large objects, while the rail supports are a hive of optical hacks as they need to fill their collision boxes. Both the ramps and supports were reworked multiple times to finally get to a result that would look and function well. Especially because of the elevated rail fences, the required sprite count grew very rapidly. This made me use all of the tricks in our Blender book and even add completely new Blender Python tools that mostly help with organising and rendering large amounts of outputs. I got the final iteration to be about 90% completion, but then it just became too much. Jersey already had experience with rail graphics, so I had asked him to help me by finishing the last details on texturing, and then he handled all of the signals and remnants again. It's hard to overstate how much bravery and mental fortitude was required to just jump into the blend file of the elevated rails, and I'd like to thank him again for that. You can probably see from the above images that he did excellently. Between Irindel on concept art, me on most of the 3D process, Jersey on finishing and together with Albert on re-evaluating multiple major iterations, the graphics took about 9 months to make. Perhaps we could have taken some simplified route trying to make tunnels work, but we believe the elevated rails offer better gameplay beyond comparison. Yet again, we can confidently say that properly focusing on some features in the expansion rather than trying to shove more things into 1.0 was a very good decision. All of the elevated rails will be only available with the expansion executable. Their technology can be researched using production science packs without the need to go to space or any planets. Elevated rails will be one of the standalone official mods next to Quality and Space Age, so you can play a vanilla-like game with just the elevator rails, for example, or other mods can just depend on elevated rails. As always, we are looking forward to all the feedback you're about to elevate. So yeah, my overall reaction was just, big thumbs up. And that's why I had to sit down and think about things to speculate, because there isn't really a lot to say other than big things, thumbs up. Can't wait to play with this. Can't wait to play with the curves. You can actually see here, this is a really clear demonstration of the new curves. This would be a lot tighter because this is a bigger curve in the new system, and this would be a lot tighter, and sort of a smaller curve, which has its advantages. But this this allows you to do more things off, so you could have more like exit points essentially on this if you wanted to branch it off, and of course you can go around in a circle still, and still let you all do all the normal stuff. But that's a really good way of showing the new curve and how smooth it all looks. Oh yes, I never really commented on at the start of the post. They talk about picking or deciding to go with bridges rather than tunnels, and V kind of listed out all of the reasons why tunnels would be problematic. And I kind of agree with it. I say it's not really a speculation point here, but a lot of the mods that do tunnels, and there's not a lot of mods, but ones that do, they use like layers. So it's effectively there's a whole second map underneath the map, and so it's a horrible performance thing. And can you imagine doing that on you're adding 5 planets or what have you, we're going to end up with 5 planets, and then each one has a second layer that is just for rail. So you've effectively adding 10. You've got 10 planets effectively, where already you've only got 5 that you can play with. So I think this is a way better solution. It also looks better. I mean, you don't want your rail disappearing under the tunnels. Would be awesome. I know they would. But it just disappears. Then it's like, well, where's the train? And as they're putting out in the post, what happens if it gets stuck in the tunnel? I mean, with this, you've obviously got the problem if it's on a great big bridge and it's run out of fuel or what have you. But you could just build a land bridge and use a Spidertron to get over there, or just drive up with another rail, another train sort of thing, and put some fuel in it. So, it just seems like a better solution all round. And we all want stuff like this, don't we? I mean, this is going to be awesome, basically. So, why would we not want to be able to see all of these, elevated rails? I guess the other thing would be, why not have another layer on top again? I think that would just get too messy and too complicated. And how would you manage the various, you'd have to have 2 types of ramps, and how would it even work, sort of thing. So I think this works better as the best of both worlds. It gives you elevated rails, so you can do, a second layer and bridges and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't get too nuts by having a third layer and a 4th layer and all that sort of stuff. So I think this is the best solution. It's interesting that this is red. The default color for train stations is red. It would be nice to be able to recolor these so that we could say, if you're, particularly now that they've introduced this more rails all next to each other and curved together and all that sort of thing, it would be nice to color code these, because the newer system, if you're going for a more spaghetti type of style, it tends to suggest that you could have like, these are the iron trains, they're all on their own set of tracks. Let's colour the rail and the pieces in blue, sort of thing, or what have you. So it would be nice if this can be recoloured. I haven't yet seen whether you can or not, but it does look, consistent to the Factorio world. I would say it does look a little bit like a theme park, though. It does look sort of like, it would fit in a fairground, so as a roller coaster rather than a train track. I think that's more to do with the angle than anything else. So this, if I said I was not massively keen on the ramp because of the forced perspective and the sort of angle of it, this looks awesome. I love this. This looks really, really good. And it does look like, a kind of elevated rail system. Obviously, it's not a monorail or something like that, but it's the rails, in the sky, and these supports look awesome. The attached signals look amazing. Basically, that looks awesome to me. I really, really like that. It's a little visually indistinct from the ramps. That's the ramps. I keep calling them ramps. A little visually indistinct from the supports. But I'm thinking in game, you're going to see this as a bit brighter and and it'll be dynamic as the things are moving around. So, I don't think that's too much of a problem. But as I say, for example, this one is a little difficult to distinguish from the other thing. I say if they were give us the option of colouring the supports, then I think you could probably sort that out. Turn it black or something. But it doesn't sound like we're probably getting that ability. At this point, they were making about the what do you call that? A guardrail, I guess, around the edge is interesting. It disappears when you do crossings, which is really good. I mean, it just looks so good. There's very little. I did criticise that earlier on a little bit, but there's the visual style in Factorio is just really, really good and so consistent with itself. It's interesting. One of the things that is interesting with this is that I did a series on Satisfactory, and towards the end they introduced the blueprint system. I don't know, I did a lot of it on the thing, but I'd come up with a rail design that looked remarkably like this. Obviously theirs is, Satisfactory, it's a monorail system anyway, but it had like guard rails around the edge, and there were support beams that looked a lot like this. And when it was doing crossings, the guardrails would go away, and it's sort of remarkable how sort of similar it does look to what I was doing. Not in any way that I'm saying that they copied that. It's just it's a logical way of doing it, and so that's what I was sort of trying to go for. But yeah, I think this looks really good. Again, just to note, that looks awesome. The signals on the track is just awesome looking. And even my criticism of it wasn't really even criticism, but the ramps, look good in the game. It's sort of I think it's just maybe because it's blown up or something, but I say it's more the forced perspective. I'm guessing you can't put signals on the ramp part. You can only put them on the actual elevated track, but maybe you can. I don't know. It sort of makes sense if the ramps are not signalable. The question for me is how far you can put these apart. I would assume there is a minimum distance. I say they probably explain this, but it'd be interesting to see how far you can take these rail supports apart. Is it just a nominal thing, and you can have them 1,000 tiles long? I doubt that. I reckon there's probably a minimum distance, like the power poles and connecting distance for roboports. It's interesting that this has two rail supports very close together. I don't know if that's because that's the rail planner putting in. Well, not rail support, that's the ramp, and then it's got a rail support right next to it. So I don't know if maybe when it does a corner, it decides to put one in. But again, there's no real indication of what the minimum distance is between the rail pieces for the elevated track, the supports. It does look like it's quite close though. It doesn't look like you can go very far without having to put support in, which is good because that would be in the real world when you have a train, a viaduct, it would be, it's continuous basically. You don't tend to support them. It's only really a rail, a rail bridge basically where you would have longer distances between, and even there it's not that far because a train just weighs so much and can be so long that you want a lot of support for it basically. So I'm not complaining about that. It's just it would be interesting to know. My assumption is it works with they were talking last Friday Facts about the 32 by 32 grid. So my assumption is that the maths works, that you could have say it's maybe 6 tiles or something between them, so it would be 6, 12, 18, 24, 36, wouldn't it? Oh, so that didn't work, but it's some sort of nice division so that you can have nice looking elevated tracks in blueprints. They're implying it works okay. Again, fills me with a sort of a little bit of a dread because the rail panner's not great. Let's be honest. The way it flips around in levels and at the moment of what directions it's picking for what rails. If it's going to do that up and down as well, I could be quite annoyed. But we will have to see. We will have to see. Yeah. Okay. Let's hope it's good and works properly and is fine and dandy. I'm nervous again. I don't have a great time with the rail planner. Maybe other people find it useful, but this maybe implies it's better. But I don't know. It just fills me with nerves, basically. I'm being over dramatic, but it's just let's hope it works. That works as planned. The reason I highlight that is because if part of the point of this is to encourage more organic rail builds. If it's very difficult to place signals, very difficult to do elevated track, it becomes annoying. Everyone just ends up blueprinting it. You lose that variety. So we'll have to see how it works, but that's a little bit of a concern, if I'm totally honest. No, I can't see. I mean, we got this weird thing in here, which is basically they're just powering a radar. I don't. This is. I don't know why they included this because there's no, as I can see, there's no. I'm not. This isn't a comment for the video, but there's no solar panels on this. It's just a bunch of charged accumulators. Which how have they charged? It's strange. I don't know why they left that part in. Because there's no power connections. This is just literally a power point. What do you call it? Substation. Some charged accumulators. How have they charged? And a radar. So why have they done that? That's odd. But yeah, it's not for the video. It's just a random comment. I mean, maybe they said on Reddit and it's I've just missed it sort of thing. But this I still don't understand. The accumulators on the island, with a substation and a radar. Obviously, they could be charging or discharging. I'm pretty sure it uses the same animation. But my assumption was that these are discharging in order to power the radar. There don't appear, from what I can tell, to be any other power lines around. And you can't really see, or I couldn't see anyway. I couldn't see any lines connecting to the substation, but it is hidden behind the rail. So people were speculating that maybe the rails are powered, and that's effectively what's happening here. Why these would then be discharging, I don't know. I mean, they could be charging, I guess. But to me, they are charging a radar. Why are they doing that? The only thing I could think is it's something to do with creative, maybe, and they've set this up. They couldn't get a proper picture without having a radar on it. But the trouble is, it's not a radar view. There's none of the lines on it. And it's like, if they got the power to turn the lines off, why not just show it all? Have it revealed. And this isn't a radar range anyway. This is too small. So yeah, I'm still not sure what's going on here, other than it's just a leftover and, they forgot to tidy it up, sort of thing. So I suppose another option, because of what they're talking about with this island, is that, well, I was speculating that this had essentially been set up, in order to take the video. But it could just be that this was an island that they claimed during the game, and there used to be some solar panels or something here, and they've just left this for whatever reason, and it's just it's just a leftover artifact. So possibility that the rails would be powered. It would make a lot of sense. It would be very useful. Let's put it that way, because if you're doing a proper island playthrough and you've got an island and another island, and you want to connect them via a rail, and you want to use the nice, bridge railway, and it just does the supports, you don't need to landfill a bridge across them. You either need two power sources, one on each island, or you're going to have to put them in power poles on anyway. So you're going to have to do land filling and put them on. So it's going to look a bit rubbish, because they do look naff going out into the water, the big power poles. So there could be another way of transporting power. It could be, solar in space or something, and that will alleviate that sort of problem. But it's a bit of a shame, really, to be able to do just nice, clean rails going out, and then you got to put the power poles on anyway. It's like, well, you're messing about with landfill. And so, unless we're getting somewhere removing landfill, that would be amazing. But yeah, so still don't quite understand or know what those are, but it's a possibility that it's a powered rail system. And elevated rails will be one of the standalone official mods next to quality and space age, so you can play a vanilla-like game with just the elevated rails, for example, or other mods can just depend on the elevated rails. So what that's saying is that, when you're setting your game up and it's got the base mod, as it calls it, and that's Factorio, engine, normal game, as it were. When you have the expansion on, it's not just a single tick box to enable the expansion. You do them independently. You can do them independently. Presumably there's going to be a button to play that, just turn them all on, sort of thing. But you can you could tick quality and just have quality. You could tick space age, which I don't know if that would be everything. It sounds like it's just the space and planets and stuff. We'll have to see. But the elevated rails, you could just tick that and have that. Now, I did ask yesterday with the quality one, because it's linked to the other planets. It would seem like it would have to have a dependency. Otherwise, you're not actually going to be able to build the legendary tier 5 modules rather. But elevated rails, if it's just dependent on production science, you don't need to go to other planets. You can just play with that. And you can just have a game where it's basically vanilla Factorio 1.1, and you've just added elevated rails. And this, to me, is suggesting that's how they're going to do all of the new things. So when we get the biters, they're going to be a thing you can switch on and off. You can have normal biters and super biters or whatever they are. Obviously, I don't know if that's how they're going to do it, but it suggests that these mods is, official mods is how they're going to do it. I know it's a weird thing to ask for, but there's almost a part of me that thinks that, if they want to do an expansion that isn't an insane overhaul to the game, that's just an add-on that's a bit cheaper, like, for example, Dectorio, basically, so making it give you ways to make the game look pretty. That would be perfect for a separate expansion mod. And I'm wondering if that's like the future for Factorio, that they just keep working on it, and it's not. Maybe eventually there is a version 3, or they completely restart and it becomes a 3D game or something like that. But maybe, the far future post version 2.0 is that you can buy expansion packs that are smaller, more dedicated, or that you'd be able to just buy the elevated rails. Part of me thinks they won't do that because they're sort of, from the more traditional gaming approach where, it's not microtransactions, it's not, a monetization of, you can't buy all with cash sort of thing. So I don't think they will do that actually, but I think it gives it the option. But yeah, it was just a very interesting point as to sort of how many official mods are we getting, basically. The big question is, so what does this mean for Space Age, basically? So we know we're getting elevated rails. We're presumably going to be able to build them on other planets. Can't see why not. But is there going to be some more integration of rails into the, say, the space platforms, for example? Is there a version of trains coming that will be able to run on sort of special space tracks, as it were? And how would that work in terms of if you've built two platforms? So say I'm basing this more on how SpaceX works. I don't know that they'll go with this in vanilla Factorio, but if you wanted to connect two of them via a rail, would you need a separate research, or can you just use normal rail? Is there a special train that is for carrying between, carrying things in space, or, how is trains going to work in space? My assumption is that it doesn't mean anything. My wild speculation was that we'll get some kind of elevator, space elevator. I don't think they're going to do that. They've basically said that it's going to be via rockets, but I think that would be like a really cool thing. Future expansion, that you have a space elevator. Basically, you can send the trains basically straight up into the space platform, and that'd be really cool. They could take ages to do it. Obviously, space elevator would be huge, but it'd be a really different way of approaching things rather than rockets or things like that. The other thing on that was I'm really intrigued to see what the whole space platforms are now. I mean, obviously I was intrigued to start with, but we haven't really got much of a hint as to what a platform is, what a spaceship is, what a rocket means, how we're going to transport between planets. So I'm kind of hoping that's the next big one they do. We seem to be getting a cadence of that's really like heavy for really big updates. I don't know if that's because they're getting them out now and then it'll be a bit quieter over Christmas and they'll take some holiday type of thing, but we've had 6 of the new Friday Facts. 3 of them have been like new mechanics, so 50% of them new mechanics, and the other 3 were like huge improvements. Some are a bit more subtle than others or edge casey, but we've had 6 updates and all of them have been enormous. There's not been one, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but there's not one that's just we're now tweaking the graphics, which I always love to see, but there's a difference between tweaking the graphics and it still works exactly the same way and introducing elevated rails. These are big gameplay things. So I don't know if we're getting all of that to start with. It feels like they'd want to leave. Every time we've done a big update in Factorio, they've left things for us to find in the actual game. So, Spidertron and stuff like that. They have surprises. So, they've obviously got a bit of a policy of leave some of the stuff for people to find out. And we're a year away and we're already getting these enormous, information drops. So I'm sort of staggered as to how much is going to be in it. It has been years, of course, it's years literally since the game came out, but I always assumed they took like a year off, basically, and took, a big period of time just to ideate, and just take holidays and not be quite so full on. And I know they refactored the code from a sort of a quite, fundamentally, so they sort of rewrote the engine essentially. So it sounds like, it hasn't, and they has been basically keeping going at the same sort of pace they had before. So, 6 updates in, 3 huge improvements, 3 massive new mechanics. How much is in this game? It's going to be insane, in a good way. And we also know, I mean, we've had teases of things that we've not been explored any further. So, we know there's new planets. Was it 4 new planets or 3 new planets? We know there's new resources. No hint as to what those are. There's those 3 machines that were teased in the previous Friday Facts. There's also the new biters. So that, at the very least, is 7 huge updates that we knew were coming, but we haven't heard any word on. Are those? How big are those? How much stuff is there? I had all these questions about the space stuff. So how do platforms work? How do we build spaceships? How does the asteroids thing work? That's also been sort of teased but not really shown. And also, what's the end point of the game now? The end of the game, the you've won screen, came up when you launched a rocket. Well, it's obviously not going to be that anymore. So what is the endpoint of the game? What are we doing where it's, gives us the stamp and basically gives us the achievement? Because although Factorio, the type of game it is an infinite sort of a game, there has to be a point because there's an achievement to say you've won the game. So what is that point? And what is it for someone who's new to the game can say, right, I have finished this game, let me play on, sort of thing. So yeah, I'm really excited to find out what are the answers to some of those are. I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Facts video and might consider coming back for another one. If you want to chat about the latest Friday Facts, then you can find me live streaming Factorio every Saturday over on my Twitch channel @Trismegistus. Thanks for watching. Cheers.